New York has always been a city that hides things. Secrets inside buildings, secrets under streets, secrets that sit in plain wooden barrels waiting for the wrong man to kick them open. And in the spring of 1903, a single barrel sitting on East 11th Street showed New Yorkers something they had never seen before, something that forced the city to look directly at a kind of violence it didn't yet have a name for, a violence brought over from Sicily, rebuilt in the tenements of Little Italy, and ready to spill out onto the streets of Manhattan. It was April 14th, 1903, a normal morning in a city that was anything but calm beneath its surface. On East 11th, near Avenue D, a heavy wooden barrel sat abandoned on the curb. New York was full of barrels back then, fish, produce, garbage, but this one had no markings, no delivery notes, no destination stamped into the wood. It had simply appeared overnight, and when curious hands finally pried off the lid, the city's first real glimpse of organized Sicilian-style murder stared back from inside. Stuffed into the barrel was the body of a man in his 30s, fully clothed, knees drawn to his chest, head forced down so he could fit inside. He had been killed violently. The medical examiner reported stab wounds and signs of a struggle, but exact details were limited even then. What mattered was the presentation, the deliberate concealment, the way the body had been packed like cargo. It was unmistakable to the few detectives familiar with Sicilian criminal traditions. This wasn't a random street killing. It was a message. The case landed on the desk of a detective who understood more than most. Giuseppe Joseph Petrosino, one of the NYPD's only Italian-born officers. He spoke the language, knew the neighborhoods, and understood the codes immigrants brought from southern Italy and Sicily. To his colleagues, it was just another homicide. To Petrosino, it looked like something he had heard whispers about ever since arriving in America. A Sicilian-style mafia killing carried out with precision, secrecy, and purpose. But first the police had to know who the dead man was. Identification in 1903 was slow. There were no fingerprints on file, no official documents in the victim's pockets. Over time, word reached the station that a man had come down from Buffalo to look at the body. He claimed he recognized the dead man as Benedetto Madonia, a Sicilian immigrant who had been living and working in upstate New York. The identification was accepted by police, though the exact nature of Madonia's life in Buffalo was never fully documented in public files. What was clear was this: Madonia hadn't just wandered into Manhattan. He had come because someone asked him to. Investigators eventually learned he was supposed to meet men from his own Sicilian community to discuss some kind of dispute, possibly business, possibly personal, but nothing more definite ever made it into official records. What is known is that the meeting was his last, and whoever he met knew exactly how they intended to dispose of him. As detectives pulled at the threads around Madonia's last day alive, one name kept surfacing in rumors, side comments, and anonymous tips: Giuseppe Morello. Morello was already a figure of quiet fear in the Italian districts of Manhattan and East Harlem. He came from Corleone, Sicily, with a reputation built before he set foot on American soil. In New York, he created a network of men from the same villages, cousins, in-laws, compatriots, who trusted each other far more than they trusted the police. The Morello group was tied to extortion, protection rackets, loan sharking, and counterfeiting. It wasn't a street gang. It was an early version of the kind of organization that would later define the American Mafia. Another name drifted into the investigation too: Tommaso the Ox Petto, a Morello enforcer known in the neighborhood for his size and brutality. There were quiet claims that Petto had been seen with Madonia shortly before the disappearance. Other whispers said Petto had been involved in a confrontation inside a tenement on the Lower East Side, but nothing was ever confirmed in court. In 1903, witnesses disappeared easily. Fear traveled faster than truth, and the Italian community had not yet learned to trust the American police. Petrosino worked the case harder than anyone. He went door to door, visited shopkeepers, talked to neighbors in Sicilian dialects, and tried to push past the wall of silence that protected Morello's circle. But it didn't matter how many tenement steps he climbed. Everyone who knew anything kept their mouths shut, whether because they were loyal, terrified, or simply trained from childhood to never speak outside the family. Nobody would name the hands that had lifted Madonia into that barrel. The newspapers seized on the story. They printed diagrams of the barrel, sketches of the dead man, wild theories about secret societies and Italian vendettas. And for the first time in mainstream American print, the word mafia appeared with a level of public alarm. Some of it exaggerated, some sensationalized, but rooted in a real fear that something new and foreign was taking shape in the shadows of New York's immigrant districts. The NYPD publicly denied that there was an organized Sicilian criminal society in New York. Officials downplayed the idea, calling it superstition or immigrant paranoia. But off the record, the barrel murder changed things. It forced police leadership to consider that Petrosino had been right, that there really were structured groups in Little Italy with hierarchies, rules, and the power to kill silently and leave almost no trail. Eventually, Morello himself was arrested, but not for murder, not for anything connected to the barrel. Instead, it was the Secret Service, not the NYPD, that finally built the case that stuck. Morello and his associate Ignazio Lupo the Wolf Saietta were deeply involved in counterfeiting, high-quality fake bills circulating through small Italian groceries and bakeries. And in 1909, they were convicted on federal charges and sent to prison. The barrel murder remained officially unsolved, but everyone who paid attention understood the connection. One crime was proven, the other was not, but the men behind both were the same. Petto. The ox, the enforcer most suspected of being the actual killer, also slipped through the city's fingers. He was arrested more than once, questioned repeatedly, but never held on the barrel case. Years later, he died violently in Pennsylvania, his body found badly injured near railroad tracks, the kind of end that looks accidental on paper, but suspicious in the world he came from. Whether his death had anything to do with the barrel murder or his ties to the Morello family was never established in any official way. The barrel case did something even the police didn't expect. It changed the NYPD itself. Because of the difficulty of investigating Italian-language rackets, the department finally created the Italian Squad in 1904, a dedicated unit of Italian-speaking officers trained to understand the codes, silence, and internal politics of the immigrant underworld, and they put Petrosino in charge. The barrel murder wasn't the only reason, but it was one of the strongest arguments he used to push for the squad's creation, a real example he could point to whenever someone claimed there is no mafia here. Today, if you walk down East 11th Street, you won't find anything that tells you what happened there. No plaque, no marker, no sign that the first major mafia-style murder in New York history was discovered in a plain wooden barrel that morning. The tenements have changed. The people have changed. The city has rewritten itself a dozen times, but that single crime still sits at the root of everything the American mafia would eventually become. The Morello barrel murder was a turning point the city didn't want, but couldn't ignore. It showed New York that old-world criminal structures had crossed the ocean intact. It revealed that silence could be stronger than evidence. It marked the beginning of organized crime as a force the NYPD could no longer pretend didn't exist. And it proved that sometimes the most important murders in a city are the ones that can't be solved, because they change the world around them anyway. A single body in a barrel doesn't sound like the beginning of an empire, but in New York, history doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it arrives quietly, sitting on a sidewalk at dawn, waiting for someone to open the lid and change the city forever.